Welcome to Happy Health Podcast. My name is Rita Rivera, and I will be your host as we explore alternative modalities in healing, well being, and graceful aging. My guest today is Val Leoffler, Continuum teacher and the creator of Inner Dance. Join me in my conversation with Val as she shares her moving story of how she used the Continuum Method to heal after brain surgery. Join me now in conversation with Val Leoffler. Hello, Val Leoffler. I want to welcome you to Happy Health Podcast.
Thank you, Rita, for having me. It's such
Yeah.
a wonderful service that you're offering our community.
Thank you. And I know you've been on a really extraordinary journey, so I'm very excited to interview and get some insights and some wisdom from you. And I think to start off with, I'd love to know a little bit about your background and what actually drew you to alternative modalities in healing and well-being.
Hmm. So I came to Santa Cruz in 1971 to study at the university and got involved in psychobiology there, which led me into being active in the community. I'm one of the co-founders of the Santa Cruz Women's Health Center.
Mm.
So I got to study, this is the 70s, right? The middle 70s. Again, out of my not being really happy with where Western medicine would take people, I got involved with more the beginnings of the alternative health movement at that time. So this is like 1974, 75. I got interested in body work, in healing modalities from the East, shiatsu, and got certified as a massage practitioner. That led me to discoveries of wanting to work with movement, and I got to work in the parallel rivers of how movement and body work feed each other,
Right. Mm-hmm.
confluence of that. Studied, dabbled in Feldenkrais, yoga, martial arts, taught
Mm-hmm.
martial arts. And that led me to the end of the 70s where I began to get involved in continuum work. And when I met Emily Conrad, who's the founder of Continuum, it was though all these different parts of my life came into a whole place. She personified uh, my political activism. She was very gutsy, very funny. Uh, she was offering a movement practice that was at its very base so deeply pleasurable and so deeply unifying,
Yeah.
that and so deeply creative that I fell in love with the work and with her.
Mm-hmm.
I began to then work with her, mentor with her, and her co-founder, Susan Harper, and also continued to study other modalities as well in the 80s, and kind of felt um, uh, the importance of how all the different things were blending with Continuum really as
Mm-hmm.
the hub for me, the center of the spokes.
Yeah. So for people who have never heard of Continuum, can you tell us a little bit about Continuum and what a Continuum class looks like or what happens during Continuum class?
Continuum is, I like to call it a movement meditation practice. It's a movement based inquiry
Mm-hmm.
into what it means to be a human in a body on this planet in these times, somewhat challenging times. So
Mm-hmm.
it was founded by Emily Conrad, who in her 45 years of developing the work began to ask questions about why um, we are so self-limiting in terms of what we really allow our beings to delve into. She asked us to move beyond a cultural trance of wherever it is that we, whatever the family trance was that we grew up in, the cultural trance, the gender politic a trance, to be able to move into a more biological, fluid-based expression that is about the communion with nature that we it is movement based, so we are working with our soma. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it has a lot of complexity to it, and it draws people from the sciences, from body work, from psychotherapy, the creative arts, dance, yoga. It draws a lot of people to it because it asks very deep questions about how we can really move beyond. And we move with each practice has particular breath sounds that we work with, coupled with certain positions that are all very gentle.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I so appreciate about Continuum is in its pause, because it's always offering us a pause, a way of being able to slow down. It meets people wherever they are in their life. So I've worked with people in classes with surgery shunts. I've worked with people that are used to doing high trapeze, flying, dance work, and everybody can be able to meet the practice wherever they are. So we're working with breath sounds, and the fluid of our being, the water of our beings, especially via wave motion, which is very subtle wave motion,
Mm-hmm.
spinal movement, visceral movement, and micro motion. So it's very gentle, but it's very, very, very deep.
Mm.
And it has the capacity to be able to be very integrative, because at its very whole center, it's a creative process.
Yeah, beautiful. It's really beautiful. I love the way you just described that continuum work.
Well, Emily felt, movement is something that we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that we do.
Right,
So
exactly.
that it's the image that might move through me, it's the poem that might immerse, it's the brushstroke that might come out of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's this relationship of how I am relating and
Mm-hmm.
engaged in my process in the world.
Yeah, and I know several years ago you were diagnosed with a brain tumor and even had surgery. And I'm really curious to hear about the way you incorporated your work and continuum in your healing process.
So I um, I found out I had a brain tumor because I had been having some symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And my symptoms, uh, they weren't symptoms that I would associate with having a brain tumor. I was 58. This was 9 years ago. I'm 67 now, and I was 58, and I had been moving, and I was a fairly active person that I thought was dealing with some degenerative, something going on in one knee. I'd
Mm-hmm.
already had two minimal surgeries in that knee. It was affecting my ability to dance and to fully do yoga and such. And I kept tracking it with orthopedics, with physical therapy, with acupuncture, with all the work that I was doing, because I was teaching a lot and my own practice with myself. And yet it just wasn't right. Something wasn't fitting. It wasn't making sense, like it being a knee problem. It was being more of a leg problem, but it wasn't. It took us 5 months between the orthopedist, PT, my own work, and working with a neurologist to discover that I had a large brain tumor that was very old, sitting on the part of my brain that affected my leg.
Mm.
So I had no cognitive disability, no headaches, no affecting any of my speech or anything like that. It was just all in the function of my leg, especially my knee. So I had to have brain surgery, which was a pretty big deal. Brain surgery is a big surgery. And I felt that when I found out, the moment of finding out I had a brain tumor, I was relieved that I knew what it was, because then it made sense. Like there was a problem going on, and like, okay, there's a reason this is happening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, I actually find that with a lot of people sometimes who've had, different symptomology, and then they get a diagnosis and it's like, okay, that makes sense. Okay, now I can move forward. There was also the sense of, I remember the immediacy of the moment of finding out, I was in a radiologist's office. He wasn't actually supposed to let me know this. I was supposed to find out later on in the evening from my doctor, but it leaked out because I saw it on the screen. And I immediately went into, what am I feeling in my butt? Can I feel my butt in the chair? Can I feel my feet on the floor? I'm going to stay present in this moment. Being here, can I feel my breath move through me? And I used those tools of presencing and just being here in the moment, because I knew that what was probably going to happen would be, with all the information, a lot of overwhelm, a lot of immediacy, urgency, a lot of different demands for me to move, all reasons why I could easily move away from being present. But I knew, just draw down into my butt,
Mm-hmm.
draw into my breath, and
Yeah.
stay with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I learned those from Continuum. And I learned that because I had and still have a very hefty ongoing practice with myself. It's about entering into this river,
Right.
not being attached to an outcome, not knowing what's going to show up, and being able to be with that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Extraordinary, really extraordinary story. And so you use the principles in Continuum post-surgery for your own healing. And I do want to mention, on your website, you have a fabulous video. I think it's called In the Dark, or Into the Dark?
Guiding in the dark.
Guiding in the Dark, that goes through the whole journey. And I really encourage people to take a look at it, because it's beautifully done. And you talk a lot about your process and your healing process using Continuum and all of your wisdom as a healer in the recuperation and the healing. And it's just really beautiful. It's very, very moving. I really appreciated watching that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was interesting was that everything I used had been things that I had been gathering,
Yeah.
especially about how I meet fear, and
Mm.
going into uncertainty and entering the unknown.
Right.
That prior to surgery, because in brain surgery, you really are dealing with the possibility of death.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was meeting that, but I was being able to also surrender to that, and
Right.
have allies of my own practice and the kind of support around me to be able to deal with that. After surgery, which the video goes into, I did, due to the nature of the surgery and the fact that the tumor was fairly deep, I did lose the capacity to move my leg fully and to sense and feel it. So I was paralyzed in that leg. And
How long did that last?
I still don't have full sensation in that leg.
Hmm.
So but I, again, that was another thing that I dealt with, that I think shows up in the video, was how once I became ambulatory and have more capacity, is that the invisibility of having a body limitation, of what goes on with that for people. Had a lot of people contact me from around the planet who are known about that, are dealing with something, having some kind of body limitation, and it's sort of like, oh, people don't know that. There's a lot of things I physically cannot do. So I
Right.
try to not live in that terrain.
Mm-hmm.
The healthy place to not live in, just as a person who's aging. And
Yes.
we have limitations, necessary limitations that come up. But
Mm-hmm.
how can I fully be whole and
Mm-hmm.
alive and juicy in this creative process,
Yeah.
and be able to work with myself that way? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what the continuum practice and everything I had been learning. This is one thing that the neurosurgeon, I had a blissful neurosurgeon. He was very great, and he just said,
Uh-huh.
he said, I don't know how much Western medicine and its neuro rehab is going to be able to offer you. I think you're the best person to be able to figure this out, if you're going to be able to walk again.
Yeah.
And working neurodevelopmentally, which is what I do. It's what I teach: how to be able to crawl, how to be able to first feel my whole midline, breathe into my diaphragm, have all of that fullness of myself, and
Mm-hmm.
then be able to let the water of my being kind of pour more into the leg and restore sensation. All of that was stuff that I had been playing with. So
Right,
it's a rich practice.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering about some wisdom you can impart to some of our viewers who may be dealing with something very similar or another invasive kind of surgery that they're doing, what you could offer them.
Yeah. So one thing I would suggest, if they already have a practice with themselves, a practice of connection, not correction. So many times what I'm experiencing, and I don't know if you feel this, Rita, but there's a lot of somatic instruction now that's going on around that is for people about trying to correct themselves. So
Hmm.
people are putting actually more somatic prisons on themselves. It's sort of like, there's something wrong. I'm not doing something right. I have to do A, B, and C to get in order to get B over there.
Right.
Instead of actually just being able to be with what is,
Yeah. Hmm.
feel into it and be able to let it shift and change with
Hmm.
your breath and your whatever. So if you don't have that kind of practice, I highly encourage you to find a somatic practitioner that can help guide you in something like that. There's
Hmm.
a lot of different practitioners to help yourself get to a continuum professional. Um, Look at my video because it has a lot of different ways in.
Hmm.
I always help people if they're capable of getting down on the floor. So being able to have a destabilized practice with themselves,
Hmm.
especially where their legs might be resting up on a chair, where they can feel their own breath, they can sense their own breath moving through them. And we can complexify. That's what we do in Continuum. We can make this a very complex, arty way of working with breaths and breath sounds, because breath sounds enliven the tissue. They enliven compression. And anybody who's had surgery is coming from a place of being compressed. Just
Hmm.
the diaphragm alone, having surgery, is compressed.
Yes.
So it's about wetting those tissues again. And those are very simple ways, but they are deeply about connecting, not correcting
Hmm.
yourself, and
Hmm.
feeling into your own embodiment.
Right.
Um, and being willing, I have to say that our systems are incredibly we have an incredible versatility in our beings to be able to shape shift.
Right.
And when you reinvent yourself, that's what you're doing.
Hmm.
And that's what healing is about.
Hmm.
Not that I'm trying to attach myself to try to get someplace that maybe I used to be, but be able to enter a new terrain.
Oh,
I
yeah.
had the gift of a lot of support, so that I knew there's a principle I use in my work, which is look at look at what's supporting a person, where they're receiving support. And I work with the gift of the orientations, the gift of the orientation of the earth, the
Mm.
that was that butt that I was feeling when I have the
Yeah.
earth supporting me that I could rest into. The
Right.
orientation of the space, the
Yeah.
breath that moves through me, the sky, the heliotropic call of being upright that we have from
Hmm.
the midline, and also the gift of the orientation of the support of the heart and that expression that we have. And I use those gifts of support and the gifts of the orientation immediately in gathering for something like brain surgery and the recovery afterwards. That's what I look at with a client, is like, where are they getting support from? Where could they be receiving more support?
Right.
And also look at what's juicy for this person. What is it that they're loving?
Yes.
What's strong in them.
Hmm.
For me, it was, I love to teach
Hmm.
and I love to practice this work.
Hmm.
And so even though I knew I was going to be afterwards teaching on my butt, not ambulatory, I decided to do that. And all of my groups and people went along with me. And I'm so grateful for that. It
Yeah.
was an experiment and quite delightful.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I'm so curious because you've been a healer and a teacher for so many years, how your teaching changed pre and post your journey with brain cancer and surgery. I mean, with the brain tumor and surgery.
Yeah. So I think Emily has a saying about making people teachers.
Uh-huh.
Says to the people, she says, "Well, how many times have you died?" And I felt like for me, this was just another unfolding of another death. And
Yeah.
I did have to look death in the eyes about this one, and like, okay, I am willing, had a good life so far, and I'm willing to go on if it's meant. And I also really love life and would be really nice to be around. So
Mhm.
I think on the base level, it really it allowed me to deepen down into a whole nother layer that was pretty immediately affected in my work hands-on with people
Mm.
and also in my practice and teaching. You know, we don't, life is very short. So why waste it in a habit that is imprisoning you,
Mm.
or not being interested in what you're doing,
Mhm.
or any of that? And I was very interested in what I was doing. So it's sort of like, it just created a deeper layer for me. I also felt like in what I had was a meningioma, which is a tumor of the meninges. And I'm a cranial sacral person as well as doing other hands-on work, that it helped me have a different, um, deeper layer of that whole meningeal system, uh,
Yeah.
its capacity for the relationship between salt water and river water in our own beings. So
Mhm.
I was thankful for that.
Wow, it's just so awesome, such a rich journey. And can you tell us a little bit about the classes that you offer and
Yeah.
just your offerings in general?
So I have continuum groups. They're called Inner Dance is my practice.
Yeah.
And I offer 3 groups a week. And those are practices that people can come into, signing up for 3 a month. And then we work throughout the season, throughout the year, of developing different themes, working with neuroplasticity. I work with nervous systems. We go through body systems
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
be able to work with different aspects of connecting to um, our fascia in different ways in our own creative process. Those are delightful. People tend to fall in love with the work.
Hmm.
And I also teach workshops. I have a Saturday workshop coming up in March. And I have 2 other classes that are more fusion based movement, that are eclectic, larger in space movement based, that people are welcome to. All of that information is available on my website, innerdance.com. But also, the big hunk of my work is working with people privately. And I do that online. I do that private sessions in my office. And that's combining the continuum work with hands-on touch work and working with people wherever it is that they're coming into the practice. They might be coming from desiring to feel more sensation. They might have an injury. They might be in recovery. They might want to be. I seem to be working a lot with people who've been to everybody, that kind of thing. You know, they have lots of,
Yeah.
and the problem might be a portal, an entry into being able to find different ways of,
Mhm.
I call it transformative self.
Mhm. Yeah. And do people seek you out because of their desire to heal from a illness that they've had, or is it across the board the kind of people that come to you?
Yeah, sometimes that might be the portal that
Hmm.
might get them to me, but it
Right.
also might be that they're sensing that there's something that, there's another way
Yes. Yeah.
alive that isn't, again, I have to use this word, somatic prisons. Just maybe it's from just having a practice in Santa Cruz where there's a lot of different things that people,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, that they start to bind themselves to, instead of like, okay, there's a primal you in there. And let's get to know who that mystery is, really.
Yeah.
That it is a, I don't know what that's going to look like, and you might not know, and so together we could find that.
Yeah.
There's a dance, and that's why I call the work inner dance,
Yeah.
because it really is.
Yeah.
It's big and little, and at its base, it's a mystery.
Yeah, well, I'm just so thrilled to have this time to connect with you. And I really want to thank you so much for the work that you're bringing out into the world. I know you've impacted so many people and so many lives and will continue to do so.
Mhm. Well, thank you for having this beautiful offering to our community. And I look forward to sharing the work of yours, Rita.
Yeah, thank you so much, Val.